Good morning. Thank you so much for having me back. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you for 45 minutes or so. Sarah, congratulations on a great run. Looking forward to learning tomorrow who's going to fill your shoes. It's great to be back in Hollywood. We had dinner last night. We saw Sam Smith, who didn't mean anything to the people from Barcelona. They're like, who's that? It's like, no, he's really important. He's an important singer. It's like, not really, just for us. But it was just cool to be around celebrities. So good to be in Hollywood, but of course, you are the rock stars in this theater. So let's go and talk about, well, I guess data. So ladies and gentlemen, flat is the new up. Last year, I was here to say, it's going to be fine. And yeah, it was kind of fine, right? And so now everybody's like, are we all going to fall off the cliff now, Jan? So I don't think so, just to be clear. But let's talk about it. So I'm going to do the total review, total US review, just we normally do. A lot of you are wondering about the pipeline. Are we overbuilding? So we got some slides about that. And then I want to spend the last, I don't know, 10 minutes or so and give you, this is like not data related at all. I just made it up. But the fine folks from Hotel News Now publish basically most of what I write. And so I was like, oh, it's a new year. It's a new decade. Let me make predictions for the next 10 years. And some of them are going to be wrong. They're probably all going to be wrong, but it's fun. So we're just going to do it, and then in the Q&A, you can beat me up and say what I missed or what I got right or wrong. Very briefly, side note, as some of you may have heard, we're no longer STR. Well, we're still STR, but we're now STR, a co-star company. Randy Smith, after starting the company with his late wife, Carolyn, 36 years ago on the kitchen table, cashed out, 27 times EBITDA, $450 million later. So we are now part of a publicly traded company called CoStar, a real estate information distribution system that tracks office, retail, industrial, multifamily housing. Doesn't impact your work with us at all, but you may have heard about it, so I just want to mention it. They don't have access to your individual property data. That is still confidential. Don't worry about it. But they have access to the market level data, which will live then on CoStar.com. If you have any questions, see me after class. But it shouldn't impact your work at all. So all the data that we always present, just like I said last year, are on hotelnewsnow.com. I know you love taking photos of slides. Take a photo of this one, and then just sort of hang out and put your phone away, which you won't, I know. But anyways, this is the most important site, hotelnewsnow.com. So let's talk about the nation as it was in 2019. Supply and demand growth in equilibrium at 2% growth, which means occupancy was -0. What does that mean? Well, it's flat, basically. So no change from the occupancy. We're still selling 2 out of 3 rooms every night for 365 days in a row. Wow, we're selling more rooms than ever. But we also have more rooms available than ever, right? So occupancy change minimal or non-existent, which means all RevPAR growth has to come from room rate growth. And room rate growth was, I don't want to say non-existent, but man, 1%. That is not a lot at all. 1. Which then you do the math, occupancy plus ADR gives you RevPAR growth. 0.9% is how the year ended, which is actually a tiny bit better than our third quarter forecast was, which was, we said, oh, the year's going to end up at 0.8. December was a monster December for a lot of you, lots of groups actually, because the Jewish holiday moved next to Christmas. And so we had a lot of group activity. So December was stronger, fourth quarter was a little stronger. Point is, overall the year was, well, flat, I guess, is the new up. So we have a new forecast, which actually came out 28 minutes ago. So I don't have a slide for it because it was embargoed until then, but I didn't realize what the timing was. So the forecast at STR says for the United States RevPAR growth for 2020 is 0. I've been with the company since 2002. We have never forecasted 0. We've always said it's going to be good, it's going to be bad, but it's not going to be nothing. So, excuse me, it's going to be very interesting to see what that actually means, because 0, of course, means that there will be some months that are pretty good and some months that are unfortunately pretty bad. My point here is don't freak out. If you see a month where RevPAR comes out that's negative, it's going to be fine. It's going to be 0. So that's sort of the forecast for this year. And then for next year, we're actually, 2021, we're actually saying that room demand is going to increase just a little bit more, so RevPAR is going to be just a tiny bit positive. But let's focus on 2020. 0% RevPAR growth means basically the same performance that we had this year, just a lot more gyrations around the zero line. What we're looking at when we're looking at the national data is, of course, a conglomerate of a bunch of submarkets, right? We track 639 submarkets that make up the United States. And what we're showing you here is the data by submarket and how much these submarkets gained or lost RevPAR. So to read this chart, let's focus on the blue line first, 2018 compared to 2017. What you're seeing is on the far right-hand side that, oh wow, 35% or so of submarkets gained RevPAR in 2018 over 2017 with 4 or more percent. Wow. So 2018 was actually still pretty good. Then what happened? In 2019, the green bar, you're seeing that 40% or so, well over that, have RevPAR declines between -4 and, call it up 2 or so. But the majority of submarkets are now moving into this either slightly negative or very slightly positive area, which makes sense, right? If we're saying that RevPAR was 0.9%, that means we had a lot of submarkets that lost. Where are those submarkets located? Exactly where you're operating. In the top, in the top 25 markets, which is where we see almost half of the rooms under construction are in the top 25 markets, and a lot of limited service hotels. So the majority of submarkets this year is likely going to lose RevPAR. So when you follow this pattern, when I show you this chart next chart, if you invite me, if you show you this chart next year, you're going to see that a lot of the bars have moved over to the left-hand side. So that's not so great, is it? But who cares? The stock market's up, right? So like we're standing on stage doing cartwheels and like, oh, this is actually flat or not good, and the stock market's like, who cares? These are the top 20 largest publicly traded companies, REITs and C-Corps, and since the Q3 announcements, which were sort of iffy, there's been this rally in the stock market, according to the STR Baird stock index. It's like, whoa, what do they know that we don't know? Or was it just that in Q3, people were like, oh my God, this is going to be terrible. And then things were just okay, and people were like, that's better than terrible, let's go. So that's what that looks like to me, that a lot of investors are like, you know what, we're baked in the not great performance, and we think that the industry is going to be fine. So super interesting disconnect between what we're reporting and how investors react. Because what we're reporting is obviously not great. You've seen this chart. We show this chart all the time. It's the long-run average between occupancy change and ADR percent change back to 1990. And you're seeing in every recession, occupancies and ADR declines further. But on the far right-hand side, you're seeing the reality. The annualized occupancy percent change is now at 0, and it's going to bounce around 0. It's actually going to be slightly negative. We're expecting minus 0.3% for the year. And if you're looking at the red line, yeah, that's pointing one way, right? So we're now at 1, but that's off the number 3. So we're going from 3 to 1, from 3 to 2 to 1 to, interesting. So we're saying for this year that room rate growth is going to be 0.3%. So basically flat with last year. So, a little growth, Jan, that's not bad. Actually, that's kind of not great. Let me show you why. If you were here last year, you remember this chart. I'm going to show this chart until you remember it, damn it. This, I think, is the most important chart that I have. So what it is what we're showing here is we make real ADR growth. We're taking ADR, average daily rate, how much more rooms are expensive, and we're subtracting from it the cost of inflation, CPI growth. How much are things more expensive? And the point here is that, so the 0 line is basically CPI for every quarter, wherever it came in. And if the line is above 0, that means we're growing room rate above the level of inflation, which is what we want. And I think in the 90s, in the 2010s, in the 20-teens, we've done that really, really well, except for the last 6 quarters, real ADR has been negative. We are not growing our top line as much as our expenses increase. And you're saying, yeah, well, that's not fair, Jan. You know, CPI is consumer price index. We don't buy, diapers or TVs or whatever, cars. We're in the hotel industry. I'm like, I get that. But this is just a proxy for how much things get more expensive. And as you all know, the Bureau of Labor Statistics tells us that wages for non-supervisory employees through October are up 4%. So that's just one cost line item, up 4%. Your top line is growing what, 1? Something has to give, And is that either profitability or are we finding other revenue sources outside of the room? Food and beverage, spa, golf, conventions, what have you. That's the big question. This chart is going to drive a lot of decisions because nobody wants to give up profitability. So we've got to figure out how to drive our top line. Who's doing it? Well, I can tell you who's not doing it. Limited service hotels are driving room rate growth of 0 point something. This chart is just the makeup of RevPAR growth, so it's the occupancy percent change and the ADR percent change. And what you're seeing here is that a bunch of classes already lose occupancy. Newsflash, lots of new supply in limited service, right? And for upscale and upper mid-scale, 3.5%, over 3.5% new supply growth. And what you're seeing then is that the pricing power seems to be on the upper end. So for luxury and upper upscale, where room rate growth is, 1 point something, that overshadows a lot of the very, very poor performance on the limited service sector. And this is going to be a problem on the limited service sector because we're going to see occupancies continue to deteriorate very likely because the new supply is not letting up. We'll talk about that in the pipeline section in a minute. So then really what we're saying is, wow, how do you operate in an environment where you have more competition coming and occupancies are already declining? Is there more pricing power to be had? On the upper end of the market, the answer seems to be yes-ish. But let's unlayer that a little bit. So what you're seeing here is the ADR percent change of group versus transient. Group, rooms booked in increments of 10 or more. Transient, rooms booked in increments of between 1 and 9. Right? Interesting. So for a room booked with a 2-day or a 2-week booking window, transient, ADR growth is less than 1% already. The saving grace in this environment for the upper end of the market is that the groups that were booked a year out, a year and a half out, that we realize today as we report on it, that those group room rates are actually up 2.5%, 2.3%. Oh, wow. So those prices were set from a conviction of strength. When we talked to the revenue managers in 2018 to price 2019, they said, yes, we're going to be full, so then therefore I will increase my room rate. The wild card, the big question is, in a year, will those lines continue to be divergent or will they converge? Will it be indeed so that revenue managers, group directors of sales for hotels who talk to groups today negotiate for tomorrow, 2020, 2021, from a position of weakness and say, uh-oh, I'm not so sure. STR keeps talking about new supply coming in, there not being any pricing power. I don't think we want to have any pricing power. Let me therefore not drive room rate as much. Let me just take the rooms and make sure my occupancy is as high as possible. That's the wild card. That's the $100 billion question on the upper end of the market. Where do group rates go? Because it turns out group rates can still be high when we have compression nights, right? When we have sold out citywide events where a lot of people come into your market. We track those compression nights. Nights when markets make an occupancy, or have an occupancy of over 95%. And, oh wait, that number is down, right? So last year, we had 542. This year, 2019, we had 401. Oh, wow. So there's a sharp decline in compression nights, in nights when markets are completely sold out. We get the question all the time, what's the impact of Airbnb? What's the impact of alternative accommodations? And I can only say, we sell more rooms than ever. Right? The industry is doing really well, except maybe on this chart, we have an indicator of what that shadow supply, that alternative accommodation supply, does. Because citywide conventions are, as you know, not a surprise. You know when the American Medical Association or the American Bar Association or whatever, the Grammys, are in town. It's very well telegraphed. It's planned 2 years ahead. So then, isn't it a surprise when you or me say, hey, I could make some extra money. Let me go to Vegas for the weekend, and put my apartment at LA Live on the market, on the alternative accommodation provider. And what that does then is, on the hotel side, we count fewer compression nights because of all that shadow supply that comes in and goes back out, that spikes just around those special events. So that is a little bit concerning because I wonder where this number goes, and it looks like it's going one way, meaning down. Now, the good news on the other side is, though, that when indeed we have a compression night, we can look at what the room rate premium is from a compressed night over a non-compressed night, and the answer is, oh, wow, we don't care. Like, we still don't, let me say this differently, we still have no problem, extracting value on a high compression nights. So almost 100% delta between a compressed night and a non-compressed night, and that hasn't really changed. It's just the amount of times we can do that has deteriorated. And I'm very, very curious to see where that actually goes going forward. Let me switch gears a little bit and talk about the pipeline. So what you're seeing here is, number one, we have 200,000 rooms under construction. We have 650,000 rooms in the total active pipeline. And you see that the growth rates are very, very small. And I am always surprised by these growth rates. We are 10 years into the upcycle, 10 years of consecutive RevPAR growth. And I would have thought that by this point, developers are like, this hotel thing is a thing. We should get into that, And we're seeing, well, some new supply, but really not this tsunami tidal wave of new supply coming to the market that we would have expected given these very, very healthy operating results for the last 10 years or so. And I think we should thank the bankers. The Wall Street guys love when I say that. We should thank the bankers. Because I think what's happening here is the people who were in the industry in 2009 and didn't get fired are still here today saying, I almost got fired when I did 95% loan to value, no questions asked. Let me not do that again. And so today, you want to get something done, it's going to be 75, 70% loan to value with a strong sponsor, with a strong brand, and that puts a lid on, I don't want to say stupid supply, but on stupid supply, So not a lot of crazy stuff happens. This is all just sort of middle of the fairway new construction. And I think that's going to help us going forward as GDP growth is slowing and as room demand growth is slowing. That said, if you operate a Courtyard, Hilton Garden Inn, Hyatt Place, Holiday Inn Express, and you open your back window, there is a crane. There is competition coming. 7 out of 10 rooms are limited service. That's where the action is. So that doesn't seem to be a bad idea on the limited service sector. So we're saying, oh wow, I just showed you that the occupancy for upscale and upper mid-scale has actually decreased already. That is only going to get worse because that's where people put their money. That's where the new supply is coming in. What that means on the other side, though, and this is a data set that we just published, is that the number of square footage, of meeting space square footage, is declining. We're not building ballrooms anymore, right? So not a big surprise, because if limited service is the name of the game, we're not doing this, right? We're doing bed and a bath for $1.50 and not nice meeting facilities. So then, therefore, we're almost basically at half of the new meeting space supply that we had in, 2008 or so. Wow. So that's interesting, which is why I think a lot of large real estate investment companies are making big bets on big boxes, because they're like, look, we're not seeing a lot of new supply coming to compete with us. That seems to be a good idea. The other thing that's super fascinating when you look at the pipeline is that when you look at the big six, IHG, Choice, Hilton, Hyatt, Marriott, Wyndham used to be obviously Starwood in there. In 2010, 6 out of 10 rooms in the active pipeline were affiliated with those big six companies. Today, over 8 out of 10. There is a clear shift from the development community and the banking community, the lending community, the construction community, to the known entities. It's very, very, very tough to get anything else done in this environment of slowing RevPAR growth. Did I say 0% for 2020? It's really, really hard to get anything like that done. So it's going to be very, very interesting to note where this shifts. Obviously, I think the answer is clear. And globally, we're seeing basically the same phenomenon. Not these big numbers, obviously, but we'll definitely see a shift towards, and Accor is in the mix, obviously, globally as well, and towards the branded properties. Another interesting side note, that it takes longer to get something done. So in the Q3 calls, Hilton and Marriott were all commenting, yes, we're signing more contracts than ever, but it takes us longer from breaking ground to opening, and we're like, oh, is that right? But it is right. Of course it's right. They wouldn't lie to us. But we look at our data, and our data bears this out. That if we compare construction times, 2019 over 2018, you're seeing that it's basically up for the majority of the classes, exception here is upper upscale. I looked at the sample set. It's a good sample set. There are 30 properties that open. I assume this has to do with warm weather locations. But the point here is just to say, look, with a 3% unemployment world, it's really hard to get contractors. It's really hard to get anybody to bid on your project. And we're seeing that in limited service hotels, in the top 25 markets. This is the name of the game. How long you think it's going to take, it's going to take you much, much, much longer. And then therefore, you're not going to make as much cash flow as you thought in the first 2 years because it takes you longer to open, which obviously has all sorts of negative implications. So that was sort of the formal part of the talk. 0% RevPAR growth. Last year was okay. This year's going to be not bad. I mean, not negative. So it's going to be fine. But okay. New supply matters, especially limited service, especially in the top 25 markets. And we're not building ballrooms. So that's sort of that part. Now, let's do something that I've actually never presented this, so bear with me as I muddle my way through this. As I said, the good folks from Hotel News Now allowed me to write 5 predictions for the 2020s, and their graphics person gave me 5 icons, which I think are super cool. And so let's just talk about that. So here's what I think is going to shape the next 10 years, and you have an app that allows you to ask me questions or just make snarky comments, because I think they're anonymous, if I'm not mistaken. So snark away. Number 1, climate change will be the dominant influence on hotel operations. I truly, truly, truly believe this, that this is the new normal. Our friends from NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, I said it, said, hey, look, in 2019, we had 14 separate billion-dollar weather and climate disasters. Billion-dollar as measured by insurance payout. In the last 5 years, every year was a $10 billion year. This is not abnormal. This is the new normal. And we as an industry have to be ready to face that challenge. That means on the real estate side, we need to build for resiliency, because things will go wrong. The weather will go crazy. That is not to say that it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And how is your real estate positioned to, no pun intended, to weather the storm, to be there when the lights go out. The other part of that has to do with operations, right? When things go wrong and houses get wiped out, people are looking for food and shelter and room and shelter. And where do they turn to? The hotel industry. So we need to be ready. But that means we need to have access to electricity, water, food, and maybe as importantly, staff. Like, how do you get your people to you in order to provide the service when the roads are closed, right? I was talking to somebody from a large brand, and he said, look, man, we were completely prepared during the last hurricane, but then the city lost power in their sewer plant, so we couldn't get out the hotel. And that meant we lost our certificate of occupancy. We weren't allowed to operate. So we were ready, but the city wasn't. I'm like, oh, wow, I never thought about that stuff. So that is really something we just need to be very aware of. And I make that point when I talk to brands, and say, hey, look, you talk to groups all the time, and you bring them to your beautiful properties and show you a beautiful pool deck. Shouldn't you also be showing your emergency generator and saying, look, we are ready. When things go sideways, your customers are safe. We will provide for them, not just with the pool on the good days, but with power on the bad days. I truly think this is a defining issue for the next 10 years. Number 2, the brand is dead. Long live loyalty. Ladies and gentlemen, name them now. You're supposed to know. You're in the industry. 30 Marriott brands, go. Right? I do this for a living, and I can't do it. Hilton, IHG, Choice, obviously Accor and Wyndham. And then our friends from Skift were kind enough to write for the industry. This is an industry-to-industry publication saying, let me explain to you the OYO brands because it's so damn complicated. I'm like, thank you. Like, I can keep track of it. You think my mom can? You think my wife can? No way. We walk into a hotel. We spent Christmas in London for a couple of nights, and she's like, oh, this is so nice. I thought we're staying at a branded hotel. Like, oh, ouch, A. But B, no, we are. It's soft branded. So don't worry about it, honey. I got it. But so point is, this is really hard. And I know that all the marketing people spend a ton of money saying, but this is the swim lane, Jan. I'm in my swim lane. It's like, yeah, but the consumers don't get it, because it's all sort of mushing together. So I think in the next 10 years, what we're going to see is just the loyalty program matters more. And I'm not saying Marriott is going to be the winner. I just love this image. Look at the font size of Marriott versus Bonvoy. What's more important to them? It's very clear that they're saying, look, we have all this stuff going on, but the reality is, are we in the tribe or out of the tribe? Are you part of the point system or not? And I think the soft brand, the emergence of the soft brand, goes exactly that way, where the owners are saying, I don't want to have beige carpets and 12-inch televisions. I want to do my own thing. But yeah, on the other side, I want to be on your website, and I do want the loyalty points, and I do want the loyalty guests, but let me do my thing. And so the brands are like, oh, okay, I guess. So soft brands it is. And I think this is just the evolution, of the soft brands, where we're just saying, look, forget the brands, Are you part of the point system or are you not? Number 3, cleaning fees. Love them, hate them, embrace them. In the next 10 years, I think we're going to see a lot more of that. This is Times Square, New York City, next Monday night. Not hard to find, right? Traditional room, 1 king bed, $288. But wait, it excludes a resort fee on Times Square, of course. And I didn't look, but what are you getting for your resort fee, right? USA Today at the elevator, free water, free Wi-Fi, and, ooh, free 800 calls. I thought they were free anyways. And people aren't happy, right? The FTC gets onto it, the government gets onto it, and people are just like, oh man, this is really, I'm not sure I like this. Because it's not a resort, number 1, and B, I look on the news on my phone. I don't need your USA Today at the elevator. Not that there's anything wrong with USA Today. But the point is, this has gotten a lot of people in a lot of trouble. And I thought Expedia actually announced they're going to list you later if you have a resort fee, right? So here's a solution. Look at this. Same area, same date. Oh, it's only $120. Wow, that's not bad. Oh, wait. $78 cleaning fee. But guess what? People are like, okay, right? Because the alternative accommodation providers have trained their audience to say, yeah, of course there is a cleaning fee. That doesn't cause any problems. There are no feathers are ruffled. People are like, yes, if I go to Airbnb or VRBO or the other alternative accommodation providers, yes, of course I'm going to pay the room. Yes, of course I pay the cleaning fee because I assume that you charge it to the person who stayed before me and I really want you to clean after them, you know? And so therefore, I'm happy to pay it. And I really, 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 really hope that we as an industry will embrace exactly that because A, dang, it's lucrative. Holy wow, 65%. And then B, that we don't just put it to the bottom line, but give it to the people who do the work, right? Give it to the housekeepers because at 3% unemployment, it's really hard to find them. This is a super easy win-win-win-win-win, right? People expect it because they got trained already, you know? Owners love it because it doesn't hit their bottom line, and housekeepers love it because they get a raise. Just do it. It's so easy. Number 4. It's Amazon's world, we just live in it. So I wrote 2 things. One, I called it's Google's world, we just live in it, but sort of too obvious, and no offense, Rob, you know. But so I just thought, let's go with Amazon. Because Google obviously knows what you search for, but Amazon knows what you bought, right? Because you have here in that walled garden of the Prime app, right? There's this plethora of information. Wouldn't it be cool to hook into that? Some of you may be too young to remember this. But I went to the Wayback Machine, which is actually an internet site, the Internet Archive Wayback Machine, and found the site for travel.amazon.com. Remember? I know Henry Hartfeld remembers. Remember this? It was actually rather short-lived. So 9th of December is when it went away after 90 glorious days, I guess. Point here is they tried, and there was a whole host of things that they had to learn, but I don't think they're done. It is just too juicy an industry to leave behind, right? You all pay commissions. Wouldn't you rather pay commission to somebody who can say, look, the customer who books your hotel buys this, I always say diapers. My 2-year-old is my boy turns 2 this week, so I'm like, I have diapers on my brain. Like, who buys this toothpaste and this diaper and this whatever, and then wouldn't you like to know all the people who have this purchase behavior? Wouldn't you like to have access to them to sell them your hotel as well? This is too obvious. And it's a prediction for 10 years, so I hope I'm right. In 10 years, I think that Amazon is going to make a push and a play, especially if things are going to slow down. If there's a slowdown in GDP growth and maybe even a slight recession, and they need to find new avenues of growth, I think this is way too obvious for them to leave behind. So stay tuned. And they own the website, travel.amazon.com already. Speaking of, I hate to say it, I'm sorry, the R word, there will be a recession. Ta-da, I said it. No, point is, look, we are 10 years into the upcycle. Normal economic cycles last 7 years, 7 to 8 years or so. We're way overdue. We are closer to a recession than not. Now, recession here the point is not about severity, right? 2 consecutive quarters of GDP declines, so minus 0.2 and minus 0.5 technically is a recession, right? And that can happen. This screenshot is 38 minutes old. Is this the beginning? I doubt it, actually. This is from CNN. The coronavirus outbreaks, almost 5,000 cases as of 9 o'clock this morning. So I don't think this is going to be as bad. It's going to have an impact on travel, and you saw the casino stocks got hammered yesterday. But I don't think this is the beginning of the downturn of a recession. I think something else will happen that's a little more structural, but I think it's going to be slow. So our friends from Tourism Economics actually predict no recession this year or next year, and we're actually with them. So it's going to be slower growth, but eventually in the next 10 years, I don't think it's like too wild a guess to say, yeah, there's probably going to be a downturn. What I don't like in that scenario is what's going to happen then. I'm afraid of 2 things. Number 1, look at the annualized ADR growth rate. You've seen this chart. I showed it 20 minutes ago. In every recession, it gets worse, right? It goes from 0.1 to minus 4.5 to minus 8.8 to what? Probably double digit, right? Especially because a lot of us, sorry, not me, a lot of you probably weren't in the industry in 2001 or 2009. You know, we have a whole host of new revenue managers, directors of sales, directors of marketing, who came into the industry in 2010 when it was just all go, go, go. Sold more rooms than ever, every year. They're like, life's good, man, this is easy. You know, it's like, yeah, it's easy until it's not. You know, and what are we gonna do when indeed then we have a slight downturn? Will we run to the exits and just cut room rate in order to boost occupancy? That's the wild card. The other thing I'm really worried about, that in this gig economy, we're all cab drivers, call it Lyft or Uber. We're all hoteliers, call it Airbnb or VRBO, right? So when you lose your job and you suddenly have to make your mortgage payment, isn't the obvious next step for you to say, hey, I can just put my second bedroom, my nanny pet, my whole apartment on one of those alternative accommodation providers so that I can make a little bit more money. I don't need to make a whole lot, so actually my price per room, per night, is actually not that high. So that could deteriorate all sorts of markets when you have this new flood of alternative accommodations at not a very high price point. So two things I'm worried about in the next downturn is price deterioration, A, from us saying occupancy matters most, and B, because new supply is going to skyrocket. Alternative accommodation new supply is going to skyrocket. 5, and I'm going to be wrong. I just don't know which ones. But I honestly think some of this stuff is going to happen. And if you're a climate change denier, get out. Like, this is absolutely the defining issue that we're going to face as an industry. You know, climate change in your coastal regions, you already live it every day. Climate change, loyalty, cleaning fees, Amazon, mild recession. That said, thank you very much for your time, and we'll do questions. Thank you.
So we have some questions for you that have been resubmitted, so thank you for your submissions. So the first question is, can you share the impact of the last health travel crisis, the SARS?
Yeah, so we did a lot of studies, and I don't have the numbers right here, but they are on hotelnewsnow.com. Our friends in the Singapore office and the Beijing office wrote extensively about it. It is a couple of things. It is obviously leisure demand drops rapidly. Group demand is shut down, and not just for that time, but obviously people don't want to go. So it's shut down for 18 months or so, basically 2 group meeting seasons. Business travel, it depends on your duty of care, what your travel agent says, hey, you can go, you can't go. But we absolutely see a sharp decline on the room demand side.
Thank you very much. Also, can you please share any additional information on the future STR product? When will it be released in the US? What cities will it roll out to? How do we learn more?
So, you talk to me, of course, or you talk to any of your friendly STR representatives to learn a lot more about it. Future Star currently exists outside Europe, specifically for some reason in Edinburgh, because that's where the office is that runs it. We're talking to basically all the major players about getting access to their data, but not in the super detailed way, but just sort of like the high level, just that the way we collect 3 numbers looking back. We're thinking of collecting a few numbers looking forward. So is it going to happen in 2020? I doubt it, but it's absolutely going to happen in specific markets outside of the United States in 2020. That's all I can say right now, but I'm happy to talk to you after class and give you specific examples for your market if you're outside the US.
Wonderful, thank you. The crowded and challenged space is limited service, but the revenue potential is from the add-ons. How should we navigate what feels like contradictory position?
Rooftop bars. I am not kidding. It is the hottest thing. So I'm based in Nashville, Tennessee, y'all, bachelorette capital of the world. I'm not supposed to say anymore. The CVC always gets all irked when I say it. But it's true. We're like party central, like weekend start on Thursday, And limited service hotels have rooftop bars, and they're printing money, So I'm like, hey, that sounds like a pretty easy thing. Of course, that means you then have to sort of understand food and beverage a little bit, but it's really more beverage. It's like all Bud Light and Jack and Coke, let's be honest, So that to me is now, of course, as an add-on, that's sort of hard to do, right? You have a box, you have a box. Good luck with that. But if you're planning something new, I would absolutely think about that. So that is, something very, very hot right now. And then the other thing, hey, how about cleaning fees?
I've heard that before. I've actually heard that before. So as new alternative accommodation models like Sonder, Stay Alfred, Lyric, Domino, et cetera, develop, how is STAR going to report their stats as they have set inventory, managed, branded? Will they be separated out from like Airbnb stats?
Yeah, so the short answer is we obviously talk to everybody, right? And we talk to all of them saying, hey, help us out. Some of them are super cagey because they're half unicorns and they want to go public and they want to make a big splash. So some of them don't share their data with us today. We assume that as Airbnb goes public and there's a lot more pressure on publicly available information, that we're going to sort of ride that coattail moving forward. The other good news is now with access to the CoStar data, because they track office and multifamily and apartment complexes, they can actually tell us where those companies sign leases. It's pretty powerful stuff. So we're just sort of scratching the surface there, but we think that there's a there to combine the CoStar data set and our data set together.
And then can you expand on the drivers behind the flat growth?
Yeah, it's flat, So look, let me break it down. So supply growth is very well understood. We call our cranes, right? Yeah, it's going to take a little bit longer to get out of the ground, to actually finish. So call supply growth 1.9%. I don't think that number is going to change much. Okay. Number two, demand growth. Demand and GDP growth are connected at the hip, specifically GDPI, the non-governmental spending of the gross domestic product connected to room demand growth. Very well understood. So GDPI growth, or the GDP growth is going to be up 1.6%. We're just sort of saying the same thing for demand. So that it gets you to occupancy decline of minus 0.3%. Okay, so now the wild card, the big question, and one that has puzzled me for, 10 years, is what do we do in an environment where we sell more rooms than ever and have almost the highest occupancy ever? Math, econ would dictate that ADR goes up. And yay, it goes up. We're suggesting 0.3%. So that is the wild card. Our friends from CBRE are suggesting that that number is wrong. And they're like, you're smoking something that's not good. It's going to be higher. They're suggesting that in 2020, the convention calendar in the top 25 markets is so much stronger than in 2019, and some of you may agree with that, that then therefore there's more pricing power in the top 25 markets, and therefore there's more pricing power overall. We respectfully disagree with that statement, and we're saying, look, last year and a year ago, we've had the highest occupancy ever and very limited pricing power. Do you really think that ADR is going up as occupancies decline? We don't think so. So, choose your poison. That's the dichotomy. It's all about rate growth. If you think you can do better than 0.3%, we salute you, we applaud you, and we want to see it in our data. It's going to be tough. And then obviously you do the math, minus 0.3 plus 0.3 gets you to 0.
Thank you.
Sorry, it's a long answer. But that's the wonky, detailed data answer.
This one has to be a little bit shorter because we only have like a minute. But
okay.
So we look at the landscape of the industry as a whole. What hospitality technology do you think is missing, and what we really could need for our future?
Yeah, so I'm talking to you, you should tell me. This is really not, I'm a data guy, I'm not a tech guy, I use this stuff. But so I think it's all about, integration, and I think it's really all about what does the customer want and how do you get the right hotel in front of the customers and they say, oh yeah, that's the one that I want. How do we deliver that? Maybe it's Amazon, maybe it's Google, maybe it's the OTA, maybe it's hotel.com. I think that battle is being waged as we speak, which is why you're all here. But the outcome of this, I think, ultimately is that the customer gets what they want. And I think that's what all these conversations need to be about. How do you get the right room in front of the right person?
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you.